Hello there, Fulhamish fans, and welcome to a brand new Tactics Chat hosted by myself, Ben Jarman, and joined by Dan Cooke. This is the whiteboard, as aptly named by all of the guys in the Telegram group. Thank you all for your suggestions. Today, we're going to talk about three main topics that have come up through Fulham's really successful season. Although we are currently table toppers and a fair whack ahead of our nearest rivals, there are two or three tactical flaws and a couple of incredible performances that we would like to talk about today. So joining me on this semi-regular video series is the legend himself, someone that I am going to proudly pass my professor baton on to. It's Dan Cooke.
Hi, Jarms. Pleasure to be on with you. I think we've been firing messages to each other via WhatsApp and Telegram, and we just decided it would probably be best if we just spoke in front of everyone about it instead.
Mate, absolutely. I'm going to say the synergy between us on the podcast, Telegram, WhatsApp, it was just about the time we got a video series together, really, isn't it? The Balkan boys joining each other on YouTube to discuss tactics, the two things that we love the most. So, you know, what's not to love? And as I said, today we have three pretty big topics to jump into, don't we? We've got Tim, Ream and Tosin. We've got the return of Cutbacks FC. And we've got Fabio the Starboy to finish us off. So three huge topics. And I know you've come armed with lots of incredible steals, some screenshots and some well-versed research. Am I right?
Yeah, I've been delving through our highlights packages from this season and speaking to you about some examples that maybe just help show people about how this actually plays out in a game.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone that follows you on Twitter now will know that you love a thread and your tactical analysis is spot on after that Cardiff set piece masterpiece. That's gone down in Twitter legendary status, that.
It was good. It was a good way of me to procrastinate from doing my uni work that's due on Friday. So it was very enjoyable to have a look at how we undid Cardiff from a set piece, which I think deserves credit because of all teams to undo from a set piece, Cardiff, it's impressive.
Exactly, mate. You're spot on. So should we jump straight into the first one, which is about Tosin and Tim Ream? So I think when we were talking about this on WhatsApp, we basically came to the conclusion that we're not entirely happy with the amount of times that both Tosin and Tim jump into challenges, especially against teams that leave two strikers up top. And from a personal point of view, I don't know if you feel the same. I started noticing it particularly from Tosin towards the back end of last year in the Premier League, where he was really energetic and very just trying to jump into every single challenge to cut balls off at source. And I noticed this, as I said, particularly towards the end of the year, maybe at a point where Fulham were becoming a lot more desperate under Scott Parker. And maybe it's because he felt he had the safety blanket of Joachim Andersen to help clean that up a bit. But it feels like this year we're being caught out a little bit, especially in that run that we had with that included the Sheffield United game. So be keen to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I think there are times, especially with Tosin, that his jumping into challenges does work. I think he's very good at winning the ball back, but it definitely does expose us at times. And I think we've seen examples of that this season. We were speaking about it earlier. You mentioned the Peterborough game, for example, where we conceded from a situation where we probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah, exactly. I think if a team like Peterborough can then jump on and make make a goal out of those errors, then what's going to happen next year when we are inevitably in the Premier League? I think when we come towards the end of this conversation, we'll probably discuss whether we think we need potentially a formation change or maybe a new style of defender. Because if Marco Silva is going to persist with this incredibly aggressive high wing backs cutting the ball off at source, then it feels like potentially we do need to invest in a slightly quicker centre half. And I think that's just in touch with all of modern football, to be honest with you. But coming back to what you've already got prepared, there's a couple of points that a couple of games you were going to point out where this has actually been a problem for us and how we can potentially stop this.
Yeah, so I think if we start with the Bristol City game at home, obviously we won 6-2. It was a really good day.
Of course.
But for the second goal, I've stopped it here. And we spoke about this. I mean, it breaks to Antoine Semenyo in quite comical fashion. FIFA-esque, I think you described it on the pod, from a block shot from Mitrovic.
Yeah.
But at this point here, when it arrives to Semenyo, you can see Tim Ream is, at this point, he's in control of the situation. There's a little bit of danger with that area in behind. That's clearly the area that we're looking to stop Bristol City getting into. And that's where Semenyo is going to try and hit. He's going to look to get into that space. And Tim Ream should know this. So his job is to stop that happening, slow Semenyo up, and then you've got Harrison Reed, who's running back. Robinson's a bit further away, but we know how quick he is, that his ability to recover in those situations is a big asset.
Yeah.
So for me, all Tim Ream has to do here is just slow the play up, hold Semenyo up, and let our reinforcements get back. Instead, we see he goes and tries to win the ball.
Yeah.
And what that lets Semenyo do is use his body to turn Tim Ream, and then he's got access to that space in behind, and he's away. Tim Ream's out of the game there. He's never going to be able to catch up with the Bristol City striker at that point. We know his pace isn't his strongest point. And it ends up in a goal, and we're 2-1 down at that point. So it shows the issues that it's caused. And I don't know what you think, but I almost sort of understand it a little bit more from Tim Ream than Tosin, because I think Tosin, his pace is enough at times, but we know that Tim Ream can be outrun. And I don't know if his tendency to dive into tackles is because he doesn't want that foot race.
I think so. I think there's definitely an acknowledgement of Tim that he's not the fastest anymore, and possibly never has been. Whereas I think with Tosin, I think he understands that his size and his height, his strength as well, allows him to win the ball at source more easy than Tim. I think in that particular example that you showed there, the thing that points out for me is that Harrison Reed is gesticulating towards Tim to either hold his ground or just to send him left. And he does neither. And whether that's because he's being coached into it, or whether he feels like, as you say, there's a subliminal thought there that he has to cut that ball off as soon as it comes near him because he hasn't got the pace anymore, is sort of for us to speculate. However, there are a couple more examples that you're going to bring to the table here, where I think one of them is against Reading, when we're seeing exactly the same thing here, but it's not just Tim this time; it's Tosin. And when you get the still up, when you do in a couple of seconds here, you will look at Tim's position here out on the left hand side in the left back channel. Firstly, you have to ask what he's doing out there, and it's probably because Robinson is too high up. And he's getting very little protection from his DM, which in this case is Tom Kearney. And you have to, again, that's another deeper question: is Tom Kearney the right person to stick a DM? This is probably for another whiteboard session. but this is Tosin now jumping into challenges.
Yeah, and I guess it's important to acknowledge we are 6-0 up at this point, but it's still something that we have seen throughout the season, and it was just looking for examples of it, just to show people what's happening. And as you can see here, it's Puskás who's receiving the ball here for Reading. Yeah. And again, Tosin, at this point, I think he's relatively in control of the situation. We can see the danger area again, where we're left open. And that's obviously where Puskás is trying to go. That's the only logical place for him to go. But in our current shape, I think we're in control of this situation, because it's very difficult for him to break that gap between Tosin and Tom. And you've got Kenny on tracking back to cover that space. The problem is that instead of closing off that space and holding off and letting us regroup, Tosin flies in. Exactly the same as we saw of Tim Ream on Semenyo. This time it's Tosin on Puskás, and he gets turned. And again, he's out of the game. And this time, instead of goal, we've got danger, because it didn't result in a goal. But I'd say with complete confidence that if you put any Premier League team in this exact moment here, that ends in a goal, because they've got what is effectively, if he gets that ball right, is a man through on goal on his own, because there's no way we can recover that situation. And what's helped us there is basically the lack of quality. And I think that's happened over the course of the season, the lesser quality of championship players.
Yeah. This reminds me of the game where Tosin jumped in. I think it's against West Brom earlier on in the season, and he got sent off. And it's been a couple of times where he granted, has been very unlucky at times to be either booked or, in that case, sent off. But that does present a danger, especially when you go up to the Premier League and you have VAR there. And if Tosin catches someone slightly wrongly, and we saw it in the game just this weekend with Brentford and that De Silva challenge, that you can get your marching orders, whether it's a mistake or not in the Premier League. So perhaps that's something we're going to have to look at. But just taking it back to the intro point, in terms of going forward into next year, do you think that if we're going to have this same style of play, that we do need to invest in another centre-back? And what style of centre-back do you think that this should be?
Yeah, I think actually it just before that as well, it goes back to the point you were making about where Tom Cairney in that DM spot, in that still in Reading, is that I do think their tendency to dive into tackles comes from that lack of stability in midfield, which is something we'll definitely touch on in a future episode. So I think that whilst investing in centre-back is obviously very important, it also is dependent on who sits in that role in front of the back four, because they play such a big role. In terms of what we need as a centre-back, I think it's clear that almost a young Tim Ream, effectively, in the sense of like someone who is mobile, someone who is confident in possession, but is able to make the right decisions in these situations. Because if we're going to be stuck with, two back because our wing backs are up high, we need defenders who are comfortable in those situations. I mean, this is obviously a ludicrous comparison, but if you look at a Virgil van Dijk in those situations, he's fantastic. Absolutely. Because his whole game plan isn't to win the ball back, it's to show the forward into a non-threatening area of the pitch. And I think that's what Tosin and Tim Ream need to be doing as opposed to what they're currently doing.
So I think this is something else we can touch on in a future episode of the Whiteboard. As you say, that midfield balance, but also Fulham's at times lack of intensity in showing people inside into crowded areas. There are too many times, I think, personally, and it's hard to criticise a team that is this far ahead at this moment in time. We don't show teams into crowded areas a huge amount. We don't often cut them off at source. I think at times we are a little bit too easy to play for in the middle, but that's for another episode. We're going to move the conversation on slightly now, away from Tosin and Tim. And what we will now look at is the return and the thankfully grateful return, in my opinion, of Cutbacks FC. Absolutely. And Cutbacks FC, that was something that was established under Slavisa Kanovic in those playoff days, those wonderful, bright, sunny days. There was no clouds in the sky and Fulham going 23 games undefeated. The goals popping in from all angles. And for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways from Slavisa's football was his ability to construct cutbacks and make sure that his team knew where the players were in the box. We saw it almost disappear entirely under Parker. There were times where Fulham sort of relied on it, but mostly we were seeing crosses from deeper areas. Everyone remembers that game where we just had Kenny Tete swinging crosses in for Mitrovic as a lone striker. No one wants to remember that at all. But since Marco Silva's been in, we've seen the return of the cutback, and I think that this has been a wonderful, wonderful return to form for Fulham because of that. And we're now seeing the best out of what is the Championship's highest striker. So, what do you think that it is that makes Fulham so lethal in these situations, and who are our main perpetrators, I guess, in these situations?
I think before examples, I think one thing that I think is important to say is why cutbacks are so much more dangerous. I think when you're looking in those situations, and we'll again show a couple of scenarios, it creates so much more indecision and panic, I think, in a back line when a cross is coming in from within the flanks of the box, as opposed to from deep or from really wide. And I think the ability to not just stand up across the far post, which obviously still has its success rates, but the option to fizz one in from within the box is so much more dangerous. And so if we look, we did it against Cardiff at the weekend. And so I've highlighted Nico Williams here with Harry Wilson on the ball. And there's quite the obvious run here, which is the space around Harry Wilson into that flank area. And that's where Nico Williams goes. And at this point, I think under Parker, and I think most teams in general who aren't trying to actually fashion these cutback opportunities, put the ball into that sort of shaded area there out wide where he can then put a cross in. But what I've highlighted is the Cardiff back line in the box there. You've got 4 men back in the box against 3 Fulham players, and only one of those in Alexander Mitrovic has any chance of winning a header against one of those Cardiff players, because aerial prowess is what they thrive off, these Cardiff players. This is their whole, this is what their foundations are built on. So instead of going there, we see this ball from Harry Wilson, which I thought was fantastic. And the run from Nico that creates it is just brilliant.
It's a wonderful ball.
And suddenly you're just in such a much more threatening part of the pitch, that danger zone, the cutback region, where Nico Williams is then able to pick it up there. And suddenly you look at the options he has. He's got 4 men in and around the area who he can try and pick out.
Yeah.
And at that point, what happens next is that Fulham should get a penalty. And that's, I think, another thing that comes with cutbacks. And we saw the same against Birmingham City, where you create opportunities for a defender to put it into their own net as well. Because if you're fizzing one across, it's very difficult to get your feet sorted out as a defender to try and clear. So I think that was a perfect example. And we saw a very similar thing against Millwall. I've highlighted now that cutback region. And again, Nico Williams and Harry Wilson, who seem to be the 2 perpetrators of this. And I think you'll touch on why maybe we see it more on the right than the left. And again, Nico Williams looks to go round Harry Wilson. This time, the ball stays quite wide. It's a bit more of a lateral ball. But here is the moment where, again, I think a Parker team and most teams would instruct their fullback to put that in first time into an area.
Agree.
Instead, Nico Williams takes 1 touch, which takes him into that area there. And suddenly, again, look, 4 options where he can try and fizz it across. And it makes it a lot harder for these 6'5" plus Millwall centre-backs to deal with this. And what do we see? Well, Mitro wills away and we get our first goal of the game.
I love the flame emoji.
I had to put it there.
It's class. So, obviously you have 2 brilliant examples on the right-hand side here. But the left, for me, it doesn't ever stand out as much as that right-hand side. And I think that's because you have 2 players, well, one player in particular in Neeskens, that loves to hug the touchline. And he loves to stand defenders up. And I think that really does negate the ability for Anthony Robinson to get round the outside of him and pull a ball in. I'm also kind of wondering whether that's of a balance situation, because if you know Neco Williams is high up the pitch, probably attacking the back post, are we just leaving Robinson there as a safety blanket to maybe negate what we talked about in the first point of, if Ream and Tosin do jump into those challenges, can he go and clear up? Yeah.
And I think also just variability in the way you attack, I think, is important as well. You can't become a one-trick pony. You have to be Manchester City-esque to be the top cutbacks FC team. By having a little bit of a difference on both flanks, and we still see it with Kenny Tete and Anthony Robinson, that they're able to put in a ball threat wide, and Nico Williams did against Hull as well. So I think just by having this other string to our bow, we're so much more potent.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a key component to our team as we go into the run-in, and you start to see teams, I think around now, Jan, Feb, March, you see teams that a lot of them don't really know where they are in this league. They don't know whether they're pushing for a playoff place. They don't know whether they're fighting for their lives. It gets to around now March, April time, and you start to see teams really get the picture of where they are long term. Well, at least until the end of the season. And you'll get teams that start fighting for their lives, where they have a low block the whole game. Like we saw against Peterborough, I think they were one of the teams that I've seen at the Cottage in recent history that has the lowest of low blocks.
Yeah.
And this is where cutbacks are going to be so important for us to unlock that. And if you can get the players in behind, or you can get on the edges of those box, and like you saw in the Steels and the examples you saw there, have 4 or 5 players in that box, then we become all the more potent. And that's brilliant.
Definitely.
So yeah. Talking of potency, we do have a chap who's currently playing number 10 for us, who's had a pretty potent I think I'm going to call it a debut season because, a couple of games at the end of last season against Southampton doesn't really count as a debut season. But Fabio, where do we run out? I said on the podcast I ran out of superlatives for Mitro, but I think I probably equally run out of superlatives for Fabio. And one of the things that always sticks in my mind now is that brilliant run against Millwall to unlock that defence, and we scored directly from it. And I think that at times he looks different class. And I think that in modern football, there are players that are so direct and so technically able that they can really start to unlock games. And I know that you are buzzing to talk about Fabio and give us some impetus on this.
Yeah, no, I love watching him play. I think the qualities he has are very much taken from someone who seems to have been able to play different roles throughout his career. I think he's picked up qualities of an 8, of a 10, of a winger, and even a forward with the quality of his finishing. I think one of the things I wanted to focus on, as you mentioned, was his directness and his ability to get at teams, because I think that's where we are at our most dangerous. And especially in games when we're looking to make things happen, it very often comes from Fabio. So as we can see him here, this is again against Bristol City at home, and this is at 2-2. And it had been an astonishing game up until that point, and we needed this moment when our confidence was back high just after we'd equalised. And he's receiving the ball here with his back to goal on the middle of the pitch from Tim Ream, and there's not a huge amount on. What he manages to do is taking it on the half turn, which I think is the best thing he does almost, is his ability to adjust his body position, to take it on the half turn and suddenly get back lines backtracking. So he takes it there, he spins, and then he's got all of that space that he can access. And that's what he does. And that is pretty much the outline of the run he then makes, which ties in with his agility. I think he's quick, but he's not exceptionally quick. But his acceleration and his ability to turn at speed, I think, are what makes him so dangerous. And defenders hate that, because you can see here that they're charging back towards their own goal, trying to cope with this player who all he wants to do is get as close to the goal as possible. And he does that, and he buries it with an incredible finish, and it puts us 3-2 up. And he's created something out of nothing on the halfway line, purely with his body positioning and then that agility. And then a similar thing, this was against Barnsley at home. We're 1-0 up at this point. We'd been okay. We'd not been spectacular. Again, there's nothing on here. He's out on the left flank. We get into these positions quite often in games. And what he does is he picks a gap that isn't there and uses, again, his speed and his agility to get through it. He's then able to lay it off to Mitrovic. And I think this, again, is where his desire to score goals is crucial, because I think some 10s would see that as enough, right? He's done his job here. He's got into space. He's laid it off to the striker. He can take over from there. But not Fabs. He knows that there's an area to target here, and he runs into that space. We get a little bit lucky with the deflection, but you see where he picks this ball up and he finishes it. And he's created that situation by himself from nothing again, which is just a ludicrously important trait to have as a player, I think.
Totally agree. And I think there have been at times throughout the season where Fulham have got stuck in second gear almost against some teams that we should probably have blown away. And you come into scenarios where the team's drawing 1-1 or we're 1-0 down at home, and it really is Fabio that puts the team on his back. And I know a few people question Fabio's commitment around that deadline day. Does he really love the club? Is he really gonna go? Will we see him back? Do you want him back if he goes anywhere? And actually, looking at those stills and what he's produced for us since that January the 1st, and what he's produced for us all season, I think really does underline the quality of Fabio. One thing that really, it doesn't annoy me, it just sort of gets to me a little bit, is when you get people that come to you who aren't Fulham fans and they say to you, heard about Fabio Carvalho, great player, probably going to come and sign for my team at some point if they're a Liverpool fan. Can you tell me how he plays? And I think what you said there in that build-up, that he is an 8, he is a 10, and he is a winger, kind of reminds me of, if we're going to use Tim Vickery's pronunciation, or Felipe Coutinho, or Philippe Coutinho. But I think I really struggle for a comparison. I had a couple written down before we came in. One of Papu Gomez, who had a great couple of seasons with Atalanta, now plays for Sevilla, and one of Dani Olmo, who come through La Masia at Barcelona, went off to Dinamo Zagreb. Oh, was it Dinamo Zagreb? Or was it Hajduk Split? And is now at RB Leipzig.
One of them, yeah.
He's now at RB Leipzig, the Spain midfielder. I think Dani Olmo and Fabio Carvalho have quite similar traits, but be interested to know what you think. And you know, what comparison? Like, is Fab in a class of his own, or does he play like anyone?
I think it's tricky because there are elements to his game that are just not typical of a 10. If you look at his tenacity, I think there's one thing we haven't touched upon is how good he is at winning the ball back in the middle of the park. He's both sort of press resistant. He gets himself out of situations with his ability to turn and to turn at speed, but also his ability to press and win the ball back. And I don't think there are many 10s who can actually do that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And especially at his young age as well. I mean, to be 18, 19 years old and play that pivotal role for a team that is going to come out of the second division, albeit the strongest second division in the whole world, I think is a huge plaudit for him. And to have that much expectation put on young shoulders and for him to be able to almost just saddle that and get on with it is great. But also that tactical ability to play that 10 role to the level that he does. It's clearly someone that understands the game incredibly well. And both sides of the game as well, as you have to now in modern football.
Yeah. I think all of the best 10s are not just technically capable. In order to be a good 10, you have to really understand your game and how you can affect the game in the final third. And he's got that. He's got that footballing intelligence.
Mate, yeah, completely agree. I think as someone that I absolutely love Mesut Ozil, always have done the whole way through his career. And honestly, I think he is one of the last, old school 10s, that luxury player 10. But I think Fab has a little bit of Mesut Ozil and all the combinations of a modern 10 playing football. Like, we have a player in our hands here, and if Fulham do somehow manage to pull off a miracle and keep Fab and somehow get him to sign a contract, we're going to be millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds richer should that happen.
Definitely, his true value is insanely big.
Yeah, massively. It's something that's also of massive value to us is going to be the questions that everyone submits here. So as we said at the start of this video, this is Dan and I's first crack at the whiteboard, and we've come up with a couple of points in our sacred WhatsApp group and across Telegram that we've really enjoyed looking into at a bit of a deeper level. We want to keep these videos around about 25 to 30 minutes to make them digestible. But what we really need to rely on is your questions and your input as well. So if you ever do want to submit a question or a topic for the whiteboard going forward, these videos will come out maybe once or twice a month if myself and Dan have the time. Then please do drop us a DM or a tweet at Fulhamish Pod on Twitter. Or what you can also do is join the community on Telegram. As Sammy and the rest of the guys have been promoting over on the podcast, Telegram is free now until the end of the season. You do not have to pay anything. And you can join over 260 members of the Fulhamish fan base and the Fulham fan base from across the world who chat day in, day out. And it's a really nice vibe over there. Dan and I have a lot of input. And feel free to please submit any questions through there too. But Dan, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts or just want to echo anything, but go right ahead.
No, nothing from me other than, we want to make this series, sort of tailored for you guys as much as possible. So we'd love to talk about the things you want to hear about. So please do let us know. Yeah,
absolutely. Of course, any feedback, really, really taking this on board. We want to make it as interactive as possible. But for now, I think that's it. And a really enjoyable first episode of the whiteboard. And a massive thanks for me to Dan Cooke for bringing all of his specialisms and expertise to the board. And mate, really enjoyed this and can't wait to do it again.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Shabs.
Thanks, mate.